Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. The latest from what was supposed to be the Haney versus Liam Paro fight. Eddie Hearn says that the Haney versus Paro fight may not happen because Haney wants at least $4 million for a comeback fight. But Eddie thinks Haney needs a warm-up fight for $1 million right now to build him up for a Ryan Garcia rematch.
It's the word on the street.
I'm not surprised. When this first became a talking point, I approached the story with a lot of skepticism. Mostly because of what dollar amount it would take to get Devin back down to Australia and the 10-pound rehydration cap the IBF uses in their title fights. That unless there's more than one alphabet title on the line in a fight, they put a 10-pound rehydration cap in their title fights. And we all know by now that Devin rehydrates pretty heavy. So the idea he's going to fight on foreign soil
with a 10-pound weight cap?
Because this is not George Cambodia. Nothing against George Cambodia, but when Devin fought him, I knew he would win. Whereas with Liam, it's a lot more dicey. It's a lot more dangerous.
The money.
The word on the street is that Devin's looking for in the neighborhood of $4 million to do this thing. And this is what we're always talking about here on the channel. Fighters that want too much money. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the beginning of Devin's relationship with Matchroom and DAZN. In order to acquire this fighter, Matchroom was willing to pay in excess of this young fighter's marquee value because he would be a major acquisition.
DAZN and Matchroom were trying to make a splash in America, paying out major cash to draw talent to the platform. So to acquire Devin, they paid him a lot of money per fight. But it wasn't because he was worth that amount. It wasn't because a Devin Haney fight generates X amount of dollars.
His contract minimum was not an accurate representation of his market value. They just paid him that to ensure that they get him, to ensure that they get exclusivity. And they got it.
But you really can't say that Devin's all that big a draw.
So that when he gets paid that amount of money per fight, $2-3 million, or whatever it was, he gets used to it naturally. He doesn't want to go backwards on the money, even though the money he's looking for is not an accurate representation of his market value.
That's how you end up with Devin Haney versus Regis Prograis on pay-per-view.
The Lomachenko fight, I could understand, and the Ryan Garcia fight, I could understand. But Haney versus Prograis on pay-per-view, that was a bit of a tough sell. And if it ends up on pay-per-view, a fight like that really ought to be a regular fight, it's because they're trying to satisfy Devin's financial demands, but they can't just give him whatever he wants. So the best bet to get him what he wants is to put his fight on pay-per-view, hoping that the money will come from me and you. Inflated purse demands 101 that make it difficult to make a fight for a fighter because of what they hope to make, even when what they hope to make isn't necessarily based on their marquee value.
He's looking for $4 million. That makes it difficult to make this fight. Overall, that makes it difficult for Devin to come back because there was enough time left in this year that Devin could have squeezed in one more fight, a rebound fight.
Rebound off of what he suffered at the hands of Ryan Garcia. I understand that the loss was overturned on paper, but psychologically, we don't know what effect that had on Devin. So a little confidence-building fight that doesn't cost too much would have been just what the doctor ordered. But because Devin wants so much money...
Wait a minute, the Liam Paro fight is not a confidence-building fight.
It's not a tune-up fight, it's not a rebound fight. That's a fight. That's a plain old fight.
Yeah, but $4 million is a lot of money.
Eddie is suggesting that Devin should return and fight for less against someone else. If he doesn't, we'll know why.
Fighters sometimes get in their own way with their inflated purse demands.
I do think he needs to have a fight before fighting Ryan Garcia again, and I do think he's going to fight Ryan Garcia again. Their rematch will likely sell more than the first fight did because of the entire controversy centered around it. Blowing the weight, testing positive for pads, hate-filled racist rants on the spaces, on Twitter. Revenge. Devin needs revenge to settle his soul and settle his mind. He's got to get his lick back.
He has to.
Anybody else at 147 would be too dangerous. For either Devin Haney, who can't punch, can't crack an egg, or Ryan Garcia, who really can't box. He's just fast and he's strong, but his boxing sucks.
Boots is too dangerous. Brian Norman is too dangerous.
A Montestanionis, even with a belt, is a high-risk, low-reward. The most beatable guy with a belt, the most beatable guy, I'd say, is Mario Barrios.
He's got the WBC.
You could give Devin decent odds against that fighter. You could give Ryan decent odds against him too. Though what would Mario Barrios be looking to make from a fight with either of them? These PBC fighters have a bad habit of asking for too much.
So much you can hardly ever get one of them in the ring. The bottom line is, it's slim pickings at 147. For Devin, for Ryan, there are a lot of risky fights there.
And the most beatable guy, even if he is the most beatable guy, he's probably going to price himself out. What that means is the best money fight for Devin and the best money fight for Ryan is running it back with each other, because they would make more in a rematch with each other than they would make with any of them. There are not that many alternatives at 147.
Over to Liam.
Newly crowned IBF champion that won the IBF title on the road from Subriel Matias, the devastating puncher. Well, he's not fighting Devin, so who is he fighting? I don't really think it matters that much. I don't, because his next fight looks to be a homecoming fight. So on an occasion like that, the real draw is the guys fighting at home. Not necessarily who he's fighting, but where he's fighting.
Get him an easy one.
I've heard rumors and rumblings about a George Kambosos fight, that George's next fight might be at 140 pounds. Now, I don't know if they're going to stick George in there with Liam straight away, but I wouldn't put it past them.
George is coming off a knockout loss to Vasyl Lomachenko. It's the first knockout he's ever suffered in his pro boxing career. Less than ideal circumstances to have him move up and fight a puncher in Liam Paro.
Bears a striking resemblance to a more masculine Edward Furlong.
Huh?
Kid from Terminator 2?
Huh.
For a homecoming fight, he doesn't necessarily need a high-profile name, a high-profile dance partner. He doesn't need one.
Depending how they structure the card, remember that a good number of Aussies are signed to Matchroom. So, what if you have Justice Hooney fight on that show? Sky Nicholson if she beats Raven Chapman.
I know it's a tight schedule. That would be a tight schedule, but hypothetically, if she did to Raven what she just did to Diana Vargas, beats her in lopsided fashion, if it worked out that way, she could come right back.
The point is, depending on how you structure the card, it may not all boil down to who Liam Paro is fighting.
It's a homecoming fight, so we'll see what happens, because if we don't know nothing else, we know it's not going to be Devin next. Over to Ryan Garcia, and what's next for Ryan Garcia? Unofficial confirmation that Ryan will be fighting Manny Pacquiao.
Amado Vargas of the Vargas brothers, Fernando Vargas's kids. He said he's going to fight in Dubai, over there with Garcia on the same show, on the undercard of Garcia versus Pacquiao.
Up until this point, there were rumors swirling that Manny would fight Mario Barrios next for Mario Barrios' WBC title, but that title don't make that fight worth more money than a Ryan Garcia fight. Ryan, whether you like him or not, he's more popular than Mario Barrios. So if Manny's fighting Ryan, he's not fighting Mario. Where does that leave Mario?
There's a lot of talk about what the PBC has planned for the fall and winter months. Most of it centered around Gervonta Davis's next fight and who's going to be on the undercard. Mario wasn't mentioned.
And in a very general sense, a unification match between Mario and a Montestanionis, that wasn't mentioned. That isn't being talked about at all. These two fighters were made an offer by Matchroom to unify titles with Jaron Ennis. And if this year comes and goes, what remains of it, and neither one of those two guys see action again.
Wow.
I mean, if what remains of this year comes and goes, and neither a Montestanionis or Mario Barrios have another fight, let alone a fight with each other, if nothing happens...
You turned down Matchroom's offer to do nothing?
You'd rather do absolutely nothing with the remainder of this year than unify titles with Jaron Ennis. We know what Brian Norman decided to do? He decided to stay busy making less than what he was offered, staying busy with Derek Cuevas on Keyshawn Davis's undercard. He's doing that. But what are these two guys doing? These two premier boxing champions.
What?
Stanionis versus Barrios is not a hot ticket. It's a unification match significant to the welterweight division, but in a very general sense, it's not a big money fight. So maybe the PBC don't really want to make it. Just because they have two of the four champions on their side of the street doesn't mean they're going to put them in the ring with each other. Case in point, it's a similar situation at middleweight. They have Lara, they have Carlos.
WBA and WBC middleweight champions. In the end, they didn't make a fight between them, even though they could have.
Oh, they made a fight between Lara and Danny Garcia. That's the fight they made. Where that leaves Carlos? Just because they have two of the four champions at a given weight doesn't mean they're going to make them fight. Perhaps it's because it's not a hot ticket.
It's not a big money fight. The fight isn't worth enough that the fighters want to have it. But maybe what the fighters want is the problem. You think you're supposed to get buku dollars every time you fight somebody solid. It doesn't work like that. You don't dictate the value of a fight or the value of a show. The market dictates that.
And if what you think you're gonna do is sit on your hands and wait, let it marinate.
Well, you do absolutely nothing to increase your marquee value. What kind of a solution is that?
It's not a solution at all. It's not a solution to anything. I wonder what's gonna happen on the PBC side of things for what remains of this year. Will Stanionis fight? Will Barrios fight?
I don't want to jump to conclusions. I don't want to judge them prematurely. But based on what rumors are out there, there's nothing out there about those two fighting each other or someone else.
So you don't want to unify with Boots. It doesn't look like you're going to unify with each other. You may piss away what remains of this year, and you wonder why the American boxing scene is dwindling. It's because of stuff like this.
Stanionis ain't American, though.
No, but his career is handled by Americans. He fights in America. He's based out of America.
So it has the same effect.
In a nutshell, none of these guys generate the kind of dough to make anything happen on their own terms, but at the same time, they won't accept anyone else's, which leads to a stagnant division that nobody cares about.
Welcome to welterweight.
Reynoso going forward?
Say again?
Are you working with Eddie Reynoso going forward?
Well, my father and Reynoso are talking together, and I think that's the best part. You know, I don't move without my father, and my father has definitely, he pushed this move for me to go to Canelo's camp. My dad was there, and it's been great, you know, so we'll see what happens.
This is just what the doctor ordered for Teofimo Lopez, and this is what I've been saying he should do for a long while now, that changes need to be made to his corner, or at minimum, additions, that if he doesn't want to sack his dad,
Then add somebody to the team.
because he's not going to get better doing what he's doing, and he needs to. If he's going to campaign as a welterweight moving forward, giving up size and giving up power to a lot of those guys that are up there, he needs to diversify his offense, tighten up his defense, he needs to improve in a lot of areas.
Teofimo is best described as a boxer-puncher with an affinity for counter-punching.
That's the kind of boxer-puncher he is. That's what he's good at. Hanging back, setting traps, and then moving in.
Though coming forward, he's not as good, not as fluid. Coming forward, he's a lot more vulnerable, a lot more hittable. There is another boxer-puncher.
One that he can learn a lot from. Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, at least these days, he's often mistaken for a pressure guy, but he's not a pressure guy.
He knows how to apply pressure, but he's not an, according to Hoyle, textbook pressure fighter. He isn't.
He doesn't have a pressure fighter's propensity for taking chances and taking damage. Canelo is a lot more defensible than a pressure guy. He doesn't have a pressure guy's work rate. He doesn't waste punches. He's very economic, efficient with what he throws, whereas pressure guys, they tend to let the punches fly.
They throw a lot of punches.
Canelo is not a pressure fighter, but he's often confused for one because these days, you often see him coming forward, drawing his opponent's lead, baiting his opponent to throw so that he can counter what they throw. He's added a layer over time. He's added a layer to his game.
That's the layer that Teofimo needs to add to his.
To be a more fluid fighter coming forward. Canelo was recently asked about his loss to Floyd Mayweather many years ago. Canelo said he was the better man that night. He's a great fighter. I learned a lot. That's when I realized this isn't going to stop me. I'm going to be the best one day. He's so smart, he had everything. A complete fighter.
Canelo used that lopsided loss to Floyd Mayweather as a learning experience, and he has indeed learned a lot over time.
People tend to forget that Canelo was more of a counterpuncher in his younger years, often hanging back and setting traps, the same way that Teofimo does, though coming forward, that was a bit of a weakness for him. And you saw that in the Floyd Mayweather fight, you saw that in the Lara fight.
He struggled with boxes, he struggled with movers, like Teofimo struggles with boxes and movers.
Now, how you know Canelo Alvarez improved, how you know he patched up those holes is he's faced a good number of boxers and movers since then. Boxers and movers like Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant,
Daniel Jacobs.
Not only are these guys boxers and movers, but they're all taller and longer fighters than Canelo, with height advantages, reach advantages, like what Teofimo would have to deal with upon moving up to welterweight. Similar situation. And Canelo was able to add to his game, improve upon being a come-forward fighter, still a counterpuncher.
Still working off the counter, but not just hanging back, coming forward as well against what are taller, longer fighters that theoretically should be able to keep the smaller man at the end of the jab.
At arm's length, Canelo Alvarez has figured out how to close the distance on these taller, longer fighters and actually land meaty punches, meaningful punches, damaging punches. That's what Teofimo needs to learn how to do, so he don't struggle with movers like a Sandor Martin or a Jermaine Ortiz or whoever he ends up facing in the welterweight division.
That if a guy wants to spend the whole night, spend the whole fight on his bike, you want to do to him what Canelo did to Caleb Plant, what Canelo did to Billy Joe Saunders, what Canelo did to Jermel Charlo.
This is who he can learn that from and how. By making that addition to his corner, by working with Eddie Reynoso so that he can in turn become a more complete fighter like Canelo became a more complete fighter.
The same challenges that Teofimo will face as a welterweight are the same challenges that Canelo already encountered at middle, at super middle, to a lesser extent at light heavy, facing fighters that have height advantage, a reach advantage.
And for the most part, Canelo has had success, the kind that Teofimo aspires to have. So it's a welcome addition to Teofimo's corner, and where I didn't like his chances as a welter before, I might now, if Eddie's training him.
We'll see if he does.
Because I think where Teofimo is now, his style, it would gel well with Eddie Reynoso's philosophy.
We'll see what happens.